Hi, I'm a games animation student. I gotta do 60 seconds worth of animation for a uni module, and here's a video blog detailing how I did it. Lots of coffee, that's a start. I decided I'd split these 60 seconds up by making a full fighting game style move list I could put on the Game Anim AZRI rig. It's a free rig that you can find on the Game Anim website, and an incredibly detailed one as well, which is it's perfect. I like it. I figured since the kind of area I want to go into with animation is that of gameplay animation itself, not more like I'm not really that interested in doing cutscene stuff. There'll still be a little bit of that in here, and fighting games are a genre of game that I have like a really huge passion for. So being able to combine having, you know, future career prospects with a hobby that I adore is just kind of works out perfectly. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. In order to know exactly what I need to animate and how I need to animate it, essentially, I need to make sure I know what kind of game I'm animating it for. Fighting games are a huge genre with so many different styles. They're not necessarily going to just easily cross over. They've all got different button layouts, different styles of gameplay, even different amounts of dimensions, which we'll get back to later. So it's important that I kind of decide how this game is gonna play, at least to a certain extent. It's fortunate, in fact, that I've already had an idea on a fighting game that I would love to make, just kicking about up here for the past 3 years. So we're gonna use that today, which is also very useful because AZRI just fits the style of it just perfectly. The setting of this hypothetical future game is super heavily inspired by my time playing Dungeons and Dragons with my mates, and taking those characters that we'd made in that RPG system and then trying to adapt them into how they would work with a fighting game, while also kind of taking into consideration the limitations that I have as just a one-man dude doing this. There's going to be a fair amount of references to that kind of source material. That being said, I have been working on a more unique world setting that I can put all of this into, just in case, you know, the time comes I want to make the game and then can't because I'll get sued. So there's that. In terms of just general playstyle, it would be a 2.5D game. Mostly because that's the style of fighting game that I'm most familiar with. It's the ones I learnt to play them on, and the ones I kind of understand the most. Whereas you've got stuff like Tekken with its mile-long move lists and trying to animate all of that. No, I'm not going to do that. No. But it's also going to make my life a lot easier, only having to deal with attacks that can go on one plane and not having to deal with characters stepping in and out of the foreground background. So yeah, I'm just one guy. In particular, the kind of games I'm taking inspiration from are most prominently Killer Instinct. For a start, it's one of my favourite games just ever, of all time. Which is, you know, it's gonna have a bit of sway in that department. But also the way that the animation and just overall presentation of the game kind of sync up with the way you play it and how the system works, you know. It's so good, and if I want to take inspiration from anything, I gotta take it from the best, so I'm gonna do that. The character animation in this game is just so good. It's so good that I wrote an entire essay on it last year. I also kind of wanted to draw from Dragon Ball FighterZ a bit, because that game, also for animation purposes, the super moves that they have are ridiculous. It also fits really well with the setting of the game. Some of the spells you can get at much later levels in Dungeons and Dragons just have these insanely huge effects, and they're just ridiculously overpowered. And if I can kind of convey that through the game, that'd be really nice, being able to bring those kind of iconic spells to life. But also, Dragon Ball FighterZ has this inherent simplicity to it that really allows it to be flexible for more creative and wacky character design. For instance, Killer Instinct uses 6 buttons at once, and each button has about 3 or 4 different attacks dedicated to it, because you've got just it on its own, you've got a crouching variant, you've got the jumping variant, and then sometimes you have like a close variant of it as well, which is just, that's a lot to work with. 6 times 4, this is a lot of moves, that's just too many. Whereas with games like Dragon Ball and the Marvel vs. Capcom series, which it kind of takes inspiration from, you only have to worry about light, medium, heavy, and then special sometimes. And depending on the game, that'll do different things. Also assists, because they're both team-based games, which I think would also kind of work really well with D&D. D&D is definitely a very heavily cooperative game where you have a group of people or a party rather than just one person going at it. So making it a team-based fighter as well would be quite fitting, but also very complicated, and I don't have the rigs to do that with, so we're just gonna sideline that bit for now. I'm not gonna make it so that the project is playable in any way. I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to put it in engine. I'm definitely not a game designer or programmer in any way, and fighting games are like notoriously hard to make, so I'm just gonna make sure someone else does that later down the line. But this is more of just like a proof of concept kind of thing, and a chance to really flex my animation muscles, which are growing nicely as it turns out. Not my real ones though. I should go to the gym more. Oh, the coffee's hitting. Good. So let's talk about AZRI. The free AZRI rig is a simple animation rig from March 2018 and above, representative of video game projects aimed at retaining a high frame rate when working even on lower end machines, with the goal of facilitating video game animation education and non-commercial gameplay prototyping. That's me! It's a really in-depth rig. I have a lot of control over the face and the body as a whole, even down to stuff like the way her cloth and hair moves, and just a whole lot of really cool stuff that I don't really need to go super in depth with, but it's nice to have that there just in case I want to make things a little bit just even more detailed and hopefully get myself more marks. Hey! Now AZRI is just a rig. She doesn't have any kind of preconceived character or anything. She is just, you download the thing and you're given this character and you're told to just go nuts with it. But one of the things with fighting games and also with D&D is this heavy focus on who the character is and what they can do. So what we need to do really is give her a character. From her design alone you can only kind of see a few things that are like concrete fact, and we'll be carrying on. Number 1 is the fact that she's a female, so that may or may not come into play, I don't really know. And number 2, she has a longsword, specifically a longsword, that is definitely a longsword. I know my swords. Number 3 is that she's an elf and she's dressed in this very kind of Euro fantasy outfit, so she definitely fits into that whole D&D aesthetic that I was going on about earlier, which is it's top notch. It's just beautiful. She is not super heavy. She's got this fairly medium build. She's not wearing particularly heavy armor, so she's not going to be big and bulky and slow. The sword is a big sword, but it's not a huge sword, and it's the kind of sword that you can go back and forth between using both either one hand or 2 hands with, which opens up a whole lot of possibilities for animation. Nice, but outside of that, really, we don't have any kind of backstory to go on. Not without kind of relating her to pre-existing characters anyway. The most immediate comparisons I kind of made when I first saw this rig were with Geralt from The Witcher, most specifically his Witcher 3 design. I think that was what I got really heavy vibes from. But also Link from The Legend of Zelda. It's the style of outfit that really fits into this broad adventurer / monster hunter kind of category, but the extent of it is a little bit unclear still, so we'll figure something out with that. I've mentioned D&D quite heavily, a lot already, and there is a good reason for that, and it's because this book in particular has some just amazing tools to help with creating a character, not just for playing the game itself, but also just in general. If you're making a character for any kind of fiction where they might be required to do things or have a personality, which is an insanely broad topic, I'm aware, but it's ridiculous just how much detail is in this one book. And it was taking my own already existing characters, seeing how they played, and then seeing how they played in the game, in the tabletop game, and then trying to adapt those moves into a more fighting game based context, that kind of got me started on this whole project in the first place. So we're definitely going to be using this as a help, because it's going to speed the process up so much. Now, if we're going to use D&D to make our character, or at least assign this shell a character, I think it's best to start off with the way that you make characters in that game, which is essentially you pick race, class, and background. That meaning race is the species, really should be called species, and you know, she's got pointy ears, she's an elf. That's pretty self-explanatory. In terms of the class, that's sort of more the role they play within the game. She's got a big sword, and my immediate assumption is to just assign her to fighter for several reasons, one of which we will be getting back to, but mostly for the sword. So in terms of her background, I think I'm actually going to go with the folk hero background from this section of the player's handbook. I reckon it just kind of fits the most. At a push, maybe Outlander, but I'm just going to take this one for now and stick with that and decide what kind of personality she has a little bit later, so I can then put that in the animations themselves. The sort of most difficult part of this is making sure I don't go too overcomplicated with it, because I'm just a guy, I'm just one man, and I've never done this before. So if I leap in and I'm just like, haha, I can do it because I play fighting games, no. If I start with the fundamentals and then move outwards from that, I'm gonna have a lot easier time. And plus it means when I want to get crazier later, I have a bit more experience to build off of. In fighting games, there are a lot of different archetypes that characters often get built around, or roles that they fit into. So if we start off with the fighting game character, we're going to make AZRI a Ryu type character, because this is Mr. Fighting Game himself right here. Pretty much every fighting game I've played outside of the really wacky ones have this kind of Ryu archetype, or the Shoto as they're known, where they are just the most all-around well-balanced character. They don't really do anything particularly well, and they all seem to have the same 2 or 3 moves with a little bit of switch up sometimes. They've got some kind of fireball that they can throw, they've got some kind of spinny kick move that they move across the screen with, and then they've got an invincible uppercut. It's just it's fundamental, which is fine. So we'll start off with that, which I also think fits AZRI quite well, just from a visual standpoint. Again, she is very designed to be, okay, I'm the Euro fantasy character. She's got the pointy ears, she's got the garb, she's got the sword, it's just all there. Yeah, justifying my inexperience. Granted, the fact she does have a sword is a little bit unorthodox for a Shoto, but it does still work. Jago from Killer Instinct, Kai from Guilty Gear, they all kind of use one-handed swords, and I emphasize the one-handed because of the rig itself. Her arms are a little bit tricky. There is an option to pair the hands with the sword hilt, but the problem is you can't pair two at the same time. It just gets a little bit messy. I'm gonna see if there's a way around that, but I'll be honest, I don't know. So we'll figure it out. Now, the amount of moves that I currently have listed out as things that are essential to animate are almost 30, and this hasn't included special moves or supers at all, so I've still got a little bit of more moveset planning to do, but once I do have that down, I'll be able to have like a more concrete idea on exactly how to do it and what fighting style the AZRI is going to use. In terms of reference, sword is not an easy thing to get reference for. Luckily for me, at least, I have plenty of ideas on places to draw from YouTube channels of people actually doing martial arts to previous fighting game characters that have similar looking moves that I can then sort of draw inspiration from. To the fact that I also just have a sword, that's going to help a lot. There's still a lot of things I need to piece together. I don't even know if I'm either going to have too little or too much animation, because this needs to be exactly 60 seconds long. So all in all, this is going to be a fun project, and it's going to take a lot of planning, but once it's done, oh boy, I'm really excited to see how this turns out. I think where I need to start with first is defining AZRI's personality, and then from that personality making an idol animation, because that standing idol is going to be where just almost every move that I've got listed and even more are going to come from. So that's the next step. Let's get started, I guess.